I don't even know where to start. Maybe I should have seen it coming, but honestly, I was too busy feeling on top of the world. My wedding day was supposed to be perfect. Sun shining through the stained glass, the smell of fresh flowers in the air, everyone smiling, and I was finally marrying the man I thought I loved. Jason. That was his name. We'd been together for 5 years, and I'd never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at me that day. Or so I thought. Honeymoon was a blur of champagne and sunshine, and at first everything seemed fine. We settled into a new rhythm, a new life. But then little things started creeping in, late nights, vague excuses, my gut twisting every time I pressed him for details. I pushed aside my doubts. I really wanted to believe in us. Still, something felt off, like a shadow lurking just behind my smile. One evening, I decided to check his phone. I know, it's not exactly the high road, but I was desperate. I'd caught tiny inconsistencies before. A missed call when he was supposed to be working, a text that seemed out of place. Nothing big enough to blow up the marriage, just enough to make my stomach churn. But that night, I was determined to find out once and for all what was really going on. I slipped into the bedroom when he was in the living room watching TV, trying to look casual, like I wasn't about to invade his privacy. His phone was lying face down on the nightstand. I hesitated, palms sweaty, heart pounding so loud I thought he might hear it from across the apartment. But I reached out, grabbed it, and unlocked it. The screen lit up with a flood of messages. I scrolled through, my eyes darting back and forth. There were the usual texts, work stuff, some memes, a few flirty exchanges, but then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A message chain with his brother, Mark. The first line was innocent enough, joking about a family barbecue, but then came the follow-up texts. My vision blurred as I read. The tone shifted, more intimate, more raw. They were talking about me, how I was so naive, how Mark had been waiting all night for his chance, and what felt like a punch to the chest, how Mark had stayed over after the wedding, claiming he'd just wanted to see how I was doing. The words hit like a freight train. I blinked hard, trying to process the sickening betrayal buried in those texts. My hands trembled, clutching the phone as if it was a weapon, my stomach churning with a mix of fury and nausea. I felt the blood rush to my head. How could he do this? With my own brother, on our wedding night. It was too much to swallow. I was reeling and the tears threatened to come, but I held them back. Instead, I sat there, clutching his phone like a grenade ready to explode. I've never felt so betrayed, so utterly stupid. I'd made myself vulnerable, trusting him completely. Now all I could think about was the betrayal, the lies, the way I'd been played for a fool. And the worst part, I couldn't get those messages out of my head. I kept staring at them, trying to understand how I'd missed all the signs. I felt dizzy, like the walls were closing in. The image of Jason's face, so sweet and charming that day, now twisted in. My mind with his brother's words. It was sickening. I needed a plan. I couldn't just walk away and pretend I hadn't seen anything. No, I was going to confront him, but not yet. I had to figure out what I was dealing with first, how deep this really went, what his motives were, and how I was going to make him pay. That's when I realized I couldn't just be the betrayed wife anymore. I had to be the one in control. I had to make him understand that I wasn't someone you could mess with and get away with it. Now I'm sitting here, heart pounding in my chest, clutching that phone like a weapon, thinking about how to execute my revenge. The moment I decide what to do next, everything between us is going to change forever. But I'm also scared of what I might lose, of what this will cost me. Still, I know one thing. I can't go back to the way things were. That much is clear. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was foggy, and my stomach still twisted from the shock of what I'd discovered. I kept replaying the texts, Mark's words, Jason's silence over and over. It was like a poison slowly spreading through my veins. I didn't want to cry again, not here, not now. But my hands trembled so badly I could barely hold a cup of coffee. I needed to think. Rationally. Or at least as rationally as possible when your entire world has just been shattered. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, my fingers itching to do something, anything. But I knew I had to be smart. If I wanted revenge, I couldn't just lose it. Not yet. I started to plan. First, I needed proof more than just the texts. I remembered a few things. Jason was meticulous about deleting things, but I knew he wasn't that careful. I could plan a bug maybe or find a way to get into his email, but I was practical. How far was I willing to go? I wasn't interested in just hurting him. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd done. So I decided to dig deeper. I started research on digital footprints, ways to trace messages, to find more evidence. I wasn't going to leave this to chance. That night I crept into his phone again, unlocked it while he was at work. I downloaded some apps, set up a few sneaky alerts, just enough to keep tabs on his activity. The feeling, cold and calculated, felt strangely empowering. I'd always been the trusting type, but now I was becoming something else. While I was at it, I found something even more disturbing. Hidden photos. I won't go into detail, but the evidence was clear. Jason wasn't just texting Mark. They had been meeting, hiding in plain sight. I felt my stomach turn again, but I pushed through. I had to be ready. The following days were a blur of planning and bracing myself. I kept pretending everything was normal, though inside I was steel. I started to craft my plan step by step. I knew I couldn't just confront him blindly. I needed leverage, something he wouldn't expect. Something to make him regret every second he ever thought he could betray me like this. One thing I was sure about. I was going to make him feel what I was feeling, betrayed, humiliated, powerless. But I didn't want to just lash out. I wanted him to see the full extent of what he'd lost, and Mark was just the beginning. I was going to hit him where it hurt, financially, emotionally, everything. That night I sat down and drafted a message. I knew I couldn't send it yet, but I needed to get it out of my head. It was raw, angry, precise. I was going to give him an ultimatum, then follow through. No more games, no more hiding. He'd see that I was serious, and I'd make sure he understood that I was done being the nice girl. As I finished writing, I felt a strange clarity mixed with a deep, gnawing rage. My stomach still churned, but I also felt a flicker of hope. I had a plan. It was dangerous, maybe even reckless, but it was the only way I could see to take back some control. My world had been turned upside down, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I looked at the clock, almost midnight. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs. It was time to act. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I'd been preparing to call all day. I didn't say much, just told the person on the other end that I had everything I needed and I was ready to make my move. I knew this was only the beginning. The real game was about to start. I could feel it in my bones. The rush of adrenaline made my palms sweaty again, but I clenched my fists. No turning back now. I was about to tip the scales, and once I did, everything would change forever. The question was, did I have the guts to see it through? I was about to find out. The next few days felt like walking on a thin wire. Every time Jason left the house, I felt a jolt of adrenaline, like I was waiting for a strike. I kept the phone close, checking the new messages I planted, watching him from a distance and gathering every little detail. I wasn't just planning revenge, I was building a case. I wanted him to feel cornered, exposed, helpless. One evening, I slipped my phone into my purse and followed him to a bar downtown. I didn't drink, just watch from the shadows, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Jason sat with Mark, their heads close, their words obscured by the noise, but the tension in their body language told me everything. They were planning something, probably the next step in their sick game. I clenched my fists, feeling the anger bubbling up again. I had to be smarter. I couldn't just barge in and make a scene. That would ruin everything. I started to piece together how to get even more leverage. I remembered I'd seen some receipts in his email, hidden, tucked away. I'd print them out, create a trail just in case. I had to be prepared for every possibility. Later that night, I sat at my desk going over everything again. My heart was pounding, my stomach twisting with a mixture of rage and fear. I knew I was close to crossing a line, but I didn't care anymore. The only thing that mattered was making him see what he'd done. I opened my email, downloaded some files, and added a few secret notes of my own, proof that I'd been watching, that I knew every move. I was ready. I also reached out to a private investigator I knew from work, someone I could trust to dig a little deeper, find more dirt, and keep everything anonymous. I wasn't about to be caught off guard, and if Jason thought he was clever, he'd underestimated how far I was willing to go. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Jason wasn't just a cheater. He was a liar, manipulator, and hypocrite. I saw messages where he told Mark he was so relieved to finally be free of me, like I was some burden to be shed. I felt my cheeks flush with rage. How dare he? The plan was solidifying in my mind. I was going to confront him, but not in a way that gave him control. I'd have the evidence ready and I'd do it face to face. I wanted him to see that I knew everything, that I had the power now. I also decided I'd leave a trail of his lies, things that would shake him to his core. I wanted him to feel the weight of betrayal, the shame of being caught. One night, I laid out my plan on paper. I'd call him, tell him I knew everything, and give him a choice: come clean or face the consequences. I'd also call his brother, set a trap. I'd leak some of the messages to the right people, his friends, maybe even his boss. I wanted him to realize that I wasn't the kind of woman who'd sit quietly while being humiliated. No, I was done playing nice. I could feel my jaw tighten as I finished writing the notes. The coldness in my heart was frightening, but I told myself it was necessary. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I'd spent years trusting, loving, and building a life with him. Now I was going to make him pay for every hour I wasted. As I prepared to execute the plan, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I had nothing left to lose. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and stared at the notes I'd compiled. I was ready to take the final step. All that remained was to make the call. I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling slightly, and pressed the button. "Jason, we need to talk," I said, voice steady but cold. "And you're not going to like what I have to say." The moment I hit send on that message, a strange silence settled over me. It felt like I'd just dropped a bomb and was waiting for the inevitable explosion. My chest was tight, fingers sweaty, and my stomach twisted even worse than before. I could feel the adrenaline pounding through my veins, but it wasn't fear. It was something colder, sharper. Satisfaction, maybe. Or maybe just pure shock at what I'd done. I stayed still, staring at my phone, waiting. A part of me wondered if he'd deny everything, brush it off, or maybe just ignore me altogether. But deep down, I knew I'd hit a nerve. That message was a calculated strike, a sign I wasn't about to back down. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. Within minutes, Jason responded. The reply was terse, defensive, and full of denial. "What are you talking about? You're crazy. I haven't done anything." The usual deflections, but I knew better. I kept my reply simple: "I know everything. Meet me tonight. Let's talk face to face." I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing, trying to anticipate what he'd do, what I'd say if he showed up. I had everything ready: proof, screenshots, the entire truth laid bare. I kept telling myself I'd be strong. I'd stand tall no matter what. When the evening finally arrived, I felt a strange mix of nerves and relief. I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away from the apartment, and stared at my phone. His name lit up the screen and my stomach clenched. I hesitated, then finally pressed call. "Jason," I said when he answered, voice steady but with a tremor of suppressed anger, "we need to settle this. You lied to me. You betrayed me with Mark. I have everything in writing." There was a pause on the other end, then silence. I could hear him breathing, trying to come up with an excuse. I pressed on. "Don't bother denying it. I've seen the messages. I want you to come home, and I want the truth. No more lies." He finally responded, voice strained. "You don't understand. It's not what you think. Everything's complicated." "Nothing about this is complicated anymore," I snapped. "You're a liar, Jason. And I want out. But before I go, I want to see you, face to face, so I can say everything I'm feeling." He hesitated, probably weighing the consequences. I could hear him sigh, then agree. "Fine, I'll come over, but we're not doing this to tear each other apart. I want to explain." I nodded, my heart pounding. I told him to come quickly, and I hung up the call. My hands trembled as I looked around my apartment, trying to steady myself. I knew this was the beginning of the end, but I also knew I couldn't turn back now. When he arrived, I was already waiting in the living room, my arms crossed, eyes cold. The moment Jason stepped inside, I saw the guilt written all over his face. He looked like a man who knew he was about to lose everything. "Jason," I said softly but firmly, "I've got the proof. I know everything. The texts, the meetings, the lies. I want you to know this isn't just about cheating. It's about trust, and you threw that away." He looked down, then tried to speak. I never meant for it to go this far. It was a mistake. Save it, I cut him off. I don't want your excuses. I want you to understand this isn't just a betrayal, it's the end of us. And I'm done being the fool who turned a blind eye. His face was pale now, eyes darting around, searching for a way out, but I was done waiting. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed evidence, screenshots of the messages, the receipts from his email, everything laid out clearly. Read this, I said, sliding it across the table. And then tell me how you plan to fix this. He stared at it, eyes wide with shock and guilt. I saw a flicker of remorse but also resignation. That's when I knew I had what I needed. This was the moment he'd realize I wasn't just going to forgive and forget. I was taking back control. As he looked over the evidence, I felt a strange calm settle inside me. Tears threatened to spill, but I fought them back. No, this wasn't about crying. It was about ending the chapter on my terms. I handed him the keys to the apartment, the last thing tying us together. "You're leaving tonight," I said. "And don't come back." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink. You want to talk about complicated. You're damn right it's complicated, and I'm done complicating my life for someone who doesn't deserve it. He looked at me, a mixture of defeat and regret, and as I watched him walk out that door, I knew I'd finally taken the first real step toward reclaiming myself. I was exhausted, yes, but also strangely relieved. The worst was over, or so I thought. The days that followed felt like they moved in slow motion, even as I tried to act normal. Inside, I was a storm cloud, raging, numb, and painfully aware that my life had just been completely upended. The house was eerily silent without Jason there. I'd handed him the keys and told him not to come back, but every time I looked around, I saw reminders of us, photos, little notes, the shared memories that now felt like trash scattered across my mind. I stayed busy, but it was all just a distraction. Every time I sat still, the guilt and rage threatened to swallow me whole. I kept replaying that confrontation in my head, every word, every gesture. I was proud I'd kept my composure, but inside I felt raw, vulnerable, and tired of pretending everything was fine. Then the fallout started to hit. Some friends noticed I wasn't myself, asking questions I didn't want to answer. My sister called, her voice trembling when she asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. I was. I felt numb, like I'd lost a part of myself. The betrayal was deep, more than just a cheating spouse. It was the feeling that I'd trusted someone I loved and he'd thrown that trust in the trash. The worst part, knowing I'd have to face him again someday, not just to get closure, but because of the mess I'd created. I'd leaked those messages to a few people, just enough to let him know I wasn't bluffing. I wanted him to see that I had the evidence, that I was serious about ending it. It was a calculated move to make him realize he'd lost control of the narrative. One afternoon, I got a text from Mark. The words hit hard. "Hey, I know things are complicated. I'm sorry about everything. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. My plan was working. But it also left me feeling emptier than ever. That sick feeling of betrayal was embedded deep in my chest. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. The next step was to confront Mark, because if Jason was the villain, Mark was just as culpable. I wasn't interested in revenge just on Jason anymore. Mark deserved to feel the consequences too. The unfinished business gnawed at me every night. I made a mental note to meet him soon, face him directly. Meanwhile, I started to focus on rebuilding myself. I threw myself into work and hobbies I'd abandoned. I bought some new clothes, fresh makeup, tried to reclaim some of the confidence I'd lost. But beneath all that, the pain still lurked. Trust was shattered. I kept asking myself, can I ever trust anyone again? One evening, I was at a cafe, trying to enjoy a quiet coffee, when I saw Jason across the street. He looked different, more haggard, guilt written all over his face. Our eyes met for a fleeting second, and I saw a flicker of regret. But I also saw something else, the realization that he'd lost me. For good. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Part of me wanted to run over and scream at him, but I held back. I knew the damage was done. Later that night, I sat down with a glass of wine and reflected on everything. I thought about how far I'd come, how much I'd changed in just a few short weeks. I also knew that healing wouldn't happen overnight. Trust, once broken, is impossible to fully repair. but I could choose to move forward, better, stronger, more aware. I made a quiet vow to myself. No matter how hard it was, I wouldn't let this destroy me. I'd learn from it. I'd take the lessons about trust, about myself, and keep going. Because at the end of the day, I realized the only person responsible for my happiness was me. And so I took the first real step toward that. I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. I didn't want to drag things out, didn't want to play any more games. I was ready to file for divorce, to put this nightmare behind me once and for all. I wanted to start fresh, to reclaim my life, clean, clear, and free. When I told the lawyer what I wanted, her voice was calm but firm. "We can get this done quickly if that's what you want. You have a strong case." I felt a flicker of relief, finally, some control. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I was done waiting for things to change. It was time to take action. As I hung up the call, I looked out the window at the sunset, the sky painted in fiery oranges and reds. It reminded me that endings are just new beginnings in disguise. I was finally ready to close this chapter and move on. Because sometimes the greatest act of strength is knowing when to walk away and start over. The day I handed over the divorce papers was oddly surreal. I took the folder from the lawyer's office, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The weight of everything, betrayal, anger, heartbreak, had finally reached a peak, and now I was free. The process wasn't easy. There were moments I questioned if I was making the right decision, if I was just running away from pain. But deep down, I knew I had no choice. Clinging to someone who'd lied, cheated, and betrayed me would only keep me chained to a version of myself I no longer recognized. That afternoon, I took a deep breath before walking into Jason's apartment to drop off the keys. I'd already set everything in motion, finalizing the divorce, making sure I had everything I needed to start over. I stood at the door for a moment, feeling the cold steel of the keys in my hand. I looked around at the place that once held so many memories, now just a hollow shell of what it was. I knocked once, then pushed the door open. Jason was sitting on the couch, eyes fixed on the floor, shoulders slumped. When he saw me, his face drained of color. I felt nothing but a cold, distant resolve. No anger, no tears, just an emptiness that told me I'd already mourned what was lost. "I'm done," I said softly, voice steady. "Here's the key. I won't ask you to explain anything. I just need you to know I'm walking away for good." He looked up, a glimmer of regret flickering in his eyes. "I never wanted it to end like this," he said, voice trembling. "You didn't want it to end at all," I shot back. "You just wanted to keep hurting me, didn't you?" He shook his head quickly. "It was a mistake. I was stupid, and I don't want to lose you." That made me laugh bitterly. "You already did, and you don't get to fix that. I've spent weeks trying to save what's broken, but you threw it all away. I can't trust you anymore, Jason, so I'm done trying." I handed him the keys, turned around, and walked away from the place we'd shared so many hopes and dreams. It was over. The chapter closed, the door finally shut behind me. As I stepped outside, the cool breeze hit my face, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. It wasn't the kind of happiness I imagined on my wedding day, but it was real. It was raw, it was painful, but it was mine. I looked up at the sky, watching the sunset bleed into shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful in a strange way, like the universe was reminding me that even in endings, there's a beginning waiting. Back home, I took a long, hot shower, letting the water wash away the last remnants of that toxic chapter. I felt the warmth against my skin, cleansing, renewing. I thought about everything I had survived, my heartbreak, my betrayal, my anger, and realized I'd come out stronger. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to let someone else define my worth. Sitting on my bed, I picked up my journal and wrote a simple sentence: "I am enough." Over and over, I repeated it. It wasn't about forgetting what happened, but about reclaiming my sense of self. I was no longer the naive girl who believed in fairy tales. I was a survivor, a fighter, someone who could start over, better, smarter, more cautious. That night, I finally let myself cry, not from despair, but from the relief of liberation. I allowed the tears to fall, then dried my eyes and looked in the mirror. For the first time in weeks, I saw a woman who was tired but resilient, who had every right to feel broken, yet chose to stand tall anyway. I started making plans, small ones at first, then bigger. I enrolled in courses I'd always wanted to take. I signed up for a gym not to lose weight but to reclaim my strength. I even booked a solo trip, a chance to rediscover myself away from the chaos and pain. And through it all, I kept telling myself one thing: I was worth more than someone's betrayal. I deserved honesty, respect, and someone who would cherish me, not betray me behind my back. So here's what I've learned and what I want to leave you with. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it's almost impossible to fully repair. But healing is possible by walking away when necessary, by taking control of your life, and by refusing to let someone's betrayal define your worth. The pain may never fully disappear, but it can fade, replaced by a quiet strength that no one can take away. Because at the end of the day, the only person who truly has to live with your choices is you, and that's a power worth holding on to.